Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Callum Akehurst-Ryan. I've got 14 years of testing experience, so I've been working in the engineering sector for a little while now. As you can see here, I'm a mind map aficionado and a kick-ass dungeon master, but I'm also a certified human. I've been focused on team integration, working across a number of different industries, so things like finance, banking, broadcast, retail, health and safety, and defence. So, and I'm currently working with Improbable. So I've got a sort of a wide range of experience, and especially being as an out gay member of an engineering team in those different industries as well. And to cap it off, I've also got a degree in psychology with a specific interest in personality and individual differences, human factors. So this is all something that's quite interesting to me. So I wanted to start off by just talking about LGBTQI plus History Month, and specifically how that relates to engineering, because we're having this talk and it's apropos because February is LGBTQI plus History Month. And just very quickly wanted to talk about Alan Turing, who's probably one of our biggest sort of engineers in the UK. And was completely famous for his key role in breaking the German Enigma code during the Second World War. By profession, he was a groundbreaking pioneer of not only computer science, but also artificial intelligence. He was a really strong mathematician. But in 1951, he had an encounter with a 19-year-old man and subsequently was prosecuted, found guilty of homosexual offences, was sentenced to chemical castration, and lost his security clearance, all because he was gay. He was officially regarded as a security risk by MI5, and it was completely impossible for him to work on code anymore. And as a result of this, in 1954, he was found dead in his bed. He had taken his own life through eating an apple that was doused in cyanide. And it wasn't actually until 2009, following an internet campaign, that the British Prime Minister Gordon Brown made an official public apology to Alan Turing on behalf of the British government. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II gave him a posthumous pardon. And in 2017, law in the United Kingdom retroactively pardoned men that had been cautioned or convicted under historical legislation outlawing homosexual acts. So it's only actually quite recently that being gay in an engineering environment has been able to be, allowed, really. So it was something that's quite problematic for us in the past. And just thinking, so I've mentioned LGBTQI plus History Month, just wanted to talk a little bit about it. First of all, to talk about the flag that you might have seen around the place. So here's what it means, in fact. So you usually see the rainbow flag, and it was invented back in 1974 by some effectively hippies at the time, which is why we've got things like life, healing, sunlight, nature, harmony, and spirit there. I think there was also a bright pink band back then for passion or for sexuality. More recently, we've been including diversity and inclusivity into our flags, and you can now see a lot of pride flags have sort of a triangular chevron in there to represent those things. And to talk about like what actually does LGBTQIA2S stand for, because that's usually a question that comes up. You've got lesbian, gay, bi, transgender. The Q stands for queer or questioning. I stands for intersex. A is for asexual. And then you've got 2S, which means two-spirited. And then plus for a lot of other people. So I thought I'd explain what the acronym meant as well. But just with regards to Pride in the UK, and just as we were talking about Alan Turing and how recent a lot of these things are, it wasn't until 1967 that homosexual acts were actually decriminalised in the UK. It happened a bit later in America, and the first Pride, the Stonewall riots, which happened in New York, happened in 1969. So then subsequently things were decriminalised in America. It wasn't until 1994 that the age of consent was equalised. And in 2005, civil partnerships were made legal, and it wasn't till very recently, 2013, that gay marriage was made legal. And within this timeline of things being quite recent, we're finding that having protection of being LGBTQ IA+ in the workplace is something that's quite new as well. So that's a bit of history. I'll go into my experiences now. So you can tell from the shirts, the voice, the mannerisms, I am a gay man within the technology industry. There's a picture of me some years ago at Pride. I've lost a lot of weight since then, hence the better jawline, but less glitter. But yeah, I've been able to, it's good, right? Being different, being LGBTQIA+, I've been able to identify issues in engineering that haven't been thought of by my colleagues. So there was a new website that was being developed that advertised using financial services to save for a wedding. And I commented on an internal project page to say, it's disappointing that we haven't taken the opportunity to include civil partnerships as part of this campaign. And within the next day, I was speaking to the CEO of the company to actually change that and embed in talking about civil partnerships as part of this website. So we made it more inclusive, something that I found because of my life experiences. I've been part of pension schemes where as a member, I've only been able to include weddings or my spouse. And based on my feedback, that was opened up to include things like civil partnerships, things like civil partners. So again, building those things. And I've also worked to get on Stonewall's list of top companies for LGBTQIA+ inclusion for some of the places I've worked. And that meant for pushing for more diversity within advertising, saying how we can provide training to our customer service reps to be able to handle the specific needs of our customers within minority groups as well. And you might say, you know, other people could find these issues, and that's really true. So a lot of these things are not things that are just specific, you know, to me or people couldn't think about. But because they refer to my experiences and who I am as a person, they're more front of mind to me. So they're much easier to spot. So let's take, for example, another example here, accessibility. People who are differently abled would have the most exposure to what works or what doesn't work for them. So they can easily input into how to improve the quality of any engineered systems that we have for accessibility. That doesn't mean that I, as somebody able-bodied, I'm not able to think about that. It's just not front of mind for me. So by having those experiences in my life, I'm able to much more readily, much more, I'd say much more simply bring that forward. So that's one of the positives about being different. But there's the bad side as well that's still very prevalent within engineering. As a software tester, it's my role to present information about a product or a system to teams, which sometimes isn't good news. And I've always tried to use empathy and a friendly human connection to my teammates to show that even though I'm giving bad news, I'm not a bad guy. And that usually means being my true or authentic self. I want to be my authentic self, which means talking with my hands and, to be honest, being a bit camp, being very myself in these situations. Sometimes, though, what that means is that people who don't want to listen to what I'm telling them, the bad news, will try to dismiss me and to shut me down. I've been called too emotional in the past when I was just presenting people with a view of, if we do this, here are the risks related to something. And in order to shut me down, I've had engineering managers in front of a whole team of people say, you're being too emotional, and really dismissing what I have to say and teaching other people to dismiss what I say based on, you know, just my hand movements, my tone of voice, who I am as a person. And it's just a completely quick way to delegitimize my contributions by saying that my way of thinking isn't valid, so it can be completely ignored. It made me feel terrible. So I was being dismissed of who I was rather than my ideas or contributions being engaged with. And that's not something that's just related to me. I'm not isolated in this. I've spoken to a number of people who've had similar situations. I've talked to women that work in the IT industry and heard very similar stories where any comments or suggestions that they've made have been overlooked or dismissed and called emotional, just that we're able to cut that out. There was a paper written by a Google engineer that was all over the news in August of 2017 because it painted a picture of engineering being something that had to be based on logic, and that emotional intelligence needed to be sacrificed in order to succeed in this industry. So this is something where anybody who showed any types of emotional intelligence or were seen to be those types of people, people who are gay, women, all those types of people were dismissed purely based on who they were as people. And cases like this show that there's still so much work to do to bring people on a journey towards embracing different types of people, that we need to show how diversity can lead to better designed and developed software. So one thing that we're seeing is this idea of an engineering monoculture, especially within testing, but just generally, we're seeing that there's this swing towards the engineering side of things, where we're agile, where we're trying to have people that have a lot of skill sets towards software development, coding, where teams want to be cheaper, so they want people that are very focused on the ability to perform. We're finding that there's this push towards engineering skills beyond and above being humans, frankly. And we want people that look like us. We want people in our teams that are very focused on logic, engineering. And that leads to a prevalence of a monoculture. We know from studies that women are put off by increasingly all the technology job adverts. So where we're looking for people that can do 52 types of code, women and LGBTQIA people are put off by those types of job adverts. And when we're asked to hire people into teams, there's a people like us mentality. I value logic as a developer, for example, and therefore I value that in other people. I don't value emotions. And we see that there's a drive towards logic in decision making rather than any sort of human factors. And that puts people off working in engineering environments. It drives people out. And there's also an assumed inclusion of engineering backgrounds. When we're working in software development, there's an assumed inclusion that people come from STEM backgrounds, that they are going to have this kind of mathematical, logical mindset as well. And that makes it harder for people to engage with others. You know, I come from a psychology background, and so there's a lack of understanding that, you know, different people have different routes into software development. And not only can this be problematic for retaining people and driving people to actually working in our teams, an engineering monoculture based on logic can be problematic for the quality of what we're building. Because if we base what we're building, if we base the quality of it on the same biases as the rest of our team, if we all have one way of thinking, then issues won't be identified. We'll all think the same way, we'll all behave the same way with this mathematical logical view and say, that's the correct route. We won't enter into discussions about things. We'll just assume that there's one way of doing things. And that then drives down the quality of what we're working on. So how can we deal with this? I want to talk about using our own experiences. So a heuristic, a way of working that I like to use when I'm building, designing, or testing a product is my own lives. I like to think about, do I like this product? How would I use this product? I'd like to bring insight about how it works based on my real world experiences. And because everybody has a unique perspective based on their own background, their own life experiences, they can bring additional insights to product design that we wouldn't have otherwise. So if we don't just rely on a specification or code to say what is correct or right, if we don't just agree with everybody else around us and instead use our own perspectives to say, well, actually, wait a second, I prefer this, or I would engage with this better in this way, well, we can start to shape our designs based on our own individual take on things, and our own unique experiences. And by coming together to do that, we can develop socially informed solutions. An example of this is retrospectives, when we have our ways of working. Whenever we do a retrospective as part of Agile, we ask everybody to come into this discussion about how are we going to work based on what you want, based on what I want, based on what's best for what they want, how are we going to work? And that's a socially informed solutionizing of our ways of working. So we know that using our own experiences, bringing in who we are as people, is good for building what's best for everyone. And to that end, developing socially informed solutions, diversity can lead to quality. And what that means is by bringing diversity into our workforce and sharing the life experiences of ourselves, we can increase our overall understanding of people and increase our empathy within our teams. And that will increase our ability to test and our ability to build better products. And what I mean by that is empathy for different types of people can help us to think about the different users of our product and how they might want to experience it. So if we talk about the usability of our product, accessibility, how understandable it is, and even, do people want to use this product effectively? And to that end, what we want is we want to have a mixing pot, a melting pot of a number of different people in order to say, yeah, let's think about this with lots of different mindsets in mind. Let's all bring different mindsets to building something. And that's going to drive up our understanding of what we should build and improve what we're building. So why don't we do that as part of engineering? And some of this is to do with deindividuation. It's not limited to people of minority backgrounds. There is a number of different ways that people can be impacted by a monoculture. But what we tend to see is that in order to be professional in your workplace, what we look to de-individualize people. We look to try and make everybody act like everybody else. So if you are, like I am, flamboyant, wearing dinosaur shirts, I am very much authentically myself, we look to say, no, be more like other people, wear a suit, wear a uniform, don't think for yourself, don't talk to yourself. I've spoken to graduate developers who are quite punky, quite goth, and they've been told not to dress as their authentic self and to conform in order to get ahead, even when there's not a dress code. And that impacted their confidence, and it made it so that they didn't bring their own individuality to the workplace. It was energy consuming for them because they're always thinking about how they've got to conform all the time. And it reduced their enthusiasm for doing their role, and it had an impact on their work. And it's a big problem for us. I mean, let's think about introverts versus extroverts. Traditionally, extroverts excel in a work environment because they're able to put themselves out there. But we should take into consideration things like, how do we engage best with introverts? How do we make the workplace good for people who are a bit quieter and engage with them? Frequently, we're told it's really unprofessional to bring our authentic self to work. And that reduces the diversity of our development teams, even further than just with the people that we've already brought in through the door, let alone bringing in new people. It reduces the diversity of what we've already got to work with. So I want to make a point here to say, I mentioned it's not just about minorities. Even if your workplace has a lot of people that are seemingly like cisgendered, heterosexual white males, everybody still has a different ideology, a different idea, a different personality that they can bring to the table if we allow people to be their authentic selves. So it's not just about saying we need diversity hires, although that's good because that brings new experiences into our workplace. It's about saying that everybody has a diverse viewpoint that we need to lift up as well. But we're told it's unprofessional to do that. And that increases monoculture. That increases this idea that there is a correct way to look, to feel, to speak, or to think. And that's problematic. Calling back to being LGBTQ+, and as well, and also calling back to not being able to be your authentic self. Imagine being asked to solve complex maths problems whilst acting like a Shakespearean hero, or to design a new type of car whilst pretending to be an elven priestess. You'll find that doing one of those things took energy away from doing the other, and that you do both poorly. So what I'm saying here is it's exhausting to feel like you're acting all the time. And it's pretty hard to keep that up forever, leading to negative psychological consequences, anxiety, depression. You can feel really alone or disconnected from those around you because you're constantly acting. So you feel that you're fake and inauthentic. Effectively, you're acting in a way which is discordant to who you are. So if I, as a person who is queer, am asked to act like everybody else, not be myself, push that down, act straight, act logical, don't talk with your hands. That is taking energy away from things where, I want to think about testing, I want to think about developing software, I want to solve problems. I don't want to be wasting time on how I look and feel and talk. I want to be putting that energy into solving problems. So yeah, I could butch it up, and act in a way that there was no chance of me being called emotional, but I'd be sacrificing my ability to do my job in order to do that. And is that really something that we want? Do we want to be able to, all act and behave in the same way and lose so much by doing that? So what I'm really calling for us to do is to say, let's be different. We've heard the phrase, it's always been like that at some point in our careers or our lives. And my response to that is, why? Does that mean nobody's ever wondered to a better way of doing this? Is it that people just resist change, and that they just want to stick to what feels familiar from the 1950s? Things that don't work or are just plain wrong. People tend to put loads of effort into protecting what's familiar to them. That this monoculture, this view that everyone has to be a certain way, everyone has to act a certain way, they'll put more energy into protecting that than they'll put into changing anything. So it's for those of us who are allies, for those of us who are wanting to change things, to put that energy in, to shift away from that it's always been like that, to be different, and to say, no, actually, it doesn't matter if I'm emotional, that's a good thing. We want to be able to bring emotion into our work. Challenge people and say, well, you say we don't want to be emotional when we're developing software, and we're not allowed to like anything, and we're not allowed to be happy ever. Emotional is just a term that people use to try and undermine you when they don't want to hear you. They don't actually mean don't have emotions. You'll see people passionately saying how they hate Apple and they love Android, for example. Passion's a great thing. We love in the engineering sector, we love passion. We usually get into it because we love what we do. So saying we don't want emotions in this industry is really just is a lie, effectively. So what can we do? Let's smash monoculture. Lemonading, let's do lemonading. How can we improve the diversity of our workforce? How can we help people who are queer? How can we help people who are different? So at a business level, there's loads of things we can do. We can support D&I initiatives. We can ensure that our job adverts use language that's appealing for many types of people. We can create environments that's pleasant for a diverse group of people. So thinking about pub culture, is that something that's going to off-put people? Having our working hours so that parents can actually get involved. What does the decor of our workplace look like? A lot of engineering places look like my first bachelor pad. Is that actually enticing to people? Thinking about the temperature of our places, are we off-putting people just by running too cold or too hot in our environments? And we should be training people on the ways to manage and interact with different types of people, especially within engineering. How do we deal with people who are seen as more emotional, who didn't come from a STEM background, who don't just want to base everything on logic? And just like with software development, we have to point out when our behaviors are not working or need to be improved. So as individuals in a team, we need to start testing how our own behaviours or our team behaviours are working. So we can challenge our colleagues to be more diverse in their thinking. We can point out when everybody is behaving alike, or that they're behaving like there are no other options, because there's always other options we can consider. We ourselves can bring our true, authentic selves, emotions and alls to discussions that we're having, to ensure that we're not just washed along in a tide of the same people having the same thoughts all the time. And we can support people's diverse viewpoints and give them the consideration and respect that they deserve. And educate ourselves on D&I topics to learn how to think like different people and how to work with those people. And support people who are, like myself, LGBTQ+, support our allies, be allies, sorry, to people, be allies to people of colour, people from different backgrounds, the women in our teams, support all those people, be allies, make sure that they're heard. And that also means not speaking up, speaking for them, but amplifying voices as well. If we remember the Black Lives Matter movement that happened recently, being a good ally means being able to step back but amplify voices so that people feel heard rather than speaking over them and talking for them. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help smash that monoculture in our engineering teams, so that we can bring more diversity and get some of these benefits. Like I've found by being gay in the community, that I can find problems that other people haven't because they're top of mind for me. And everybody with their own experiences will be able to do that too. So that's everything that I was going to share. But I know that we said that we can, ask me anything, I guess, or ask questions or engage in a conversation about it.
Thank you so much for that, Callum. I thought that was brilliant. Really, really good insight. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to either put your video on or just unmute yourself and ask them, or pop them in the chat. But actually, I've got a quick question, if that's okay. You mentioned about D&I initiatives, and this is open to anyone to answer, but have you got any specific examples that for companies that you've worked with that you think stand out, that have made you feel like you belong? Is there anything that you've experienced yourself in the companies that you've worked in?
Yeah, definitely. I've been part of companies that have had really strong communities. There was like a women in engineering group. There was an LGBT plus group. There was a BAME group as well. And they came together under D&I initiatives to provide buddies to people and forums to discuss issues. And also there was always a management or an executive person in those groups that was there to provide mentoring and discuss things as well. And that was really good because it meant that we could, as people working at the company, bubble things up to the D&I initiatives to help drive things forward, which was really cool.
Oh, great. Okay. And just another question from me. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask. But how did you get into tech?
Myself? Yeah, no, that's a good question. I find that a lot of people from like minority backgrounds and stuff, they tend to get into education a lot, and they tend to just be interested in how things work. So for myself, I wanted to stay in education. I got into psychology, and from there I was able to, I started working in a call center after university actually. And from there I was able to get an apprenticeship working with other testers at the place I worked, and just came into technology that way. So it wasn't something I'd planned to get into. Again, because of this sort of monoculture view, I always thought, oh, it's a bit for me. But I was very lucky and fortunate that there was a really nice apprenticeship scheme where I worked at this. It was a big financial company, and it was actually headed up by a lot of women working in testing. So I felt like, oh, this is somewhere, an engineering practice that I could be more involved in. There was a lot of empathy around it, and it was really good. And to this day, I work with a number of like really like amazing women in testing, and I really appreciate, you know, the level of empathy and just the ability to actually act as myself because I'm working with them. So I'm able to be more, I just feel that I'm able to be more open because you've got these people around you who are sort of trailblazing and open to that as well, which is really nice.
Oh, that's good. I mean, it's interesting that you went through an apprenticeship scheme as well, because you don't hear of that a lot, of people getting into tech through apprenticeships. You hear that they've gone, you know, got a university degree and then gone down that route. So it's good to hear that there's other ways and other routes of getting into the tech industry. So does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I'd thank you. First of all, thank you for putting this together.
No, that's no problem at all. Thanks for coming.
No, it's great. And Callum, that was absolutely beautiful. Your experience, articulate and evidence-based. I love that. So I can tell you're, I'm also interested in psychology, and I've just kind of gotten into coaching. But there was one question, I've got a couple of questions, but then I've also got something to show you as well on a point you made, which you might smile at. And it was, so have you been ostracized, you know, because of your identity and orientation in situations, or because you've been in a sort of professional environment? Some people, you know, they tolerate it, and I always explain there's a huge difference between tolerating and supporting. You know, it's absolutely huge. But I just wondered, you know, have you had any kind of less than satisfactory experiences in the teams?
Yeah, so specifically the one that I was talking about, where I was part of, it was part of a planning meeting, and the engineering manager dismissed what I said as part of being too emotional. And I followed up with them and took them aside. So at the time I was like, oof, okay. I took them aside to say, do you understand how, you know, you've basically taught people to say, because of my mannerisms and my personality, as well as my role and the fact that I'm gay, to dismiss me entirely. That basically that effectively was somewhat homophobic. And that manager, my manager at the time, they tried to dispel it or push it down, or try and push the problem onto being me. So yeah, that was very much an environment that I didn't feel was supportive of what I was doing or who I was as a person. So I ended up leaving that place. But
what about what you didn't hear? Like, I've always wondered, like, transphobia from my perspective has been, I wonder why I didn't get that job. You know, there wasn't any, you know, in fact, swimmingly well interviews, but I was astonished I didn't hear back, you know, based on my experience with something. And you sort of wonder, because you never know. That's almost more cruel, right? You don't, you don't know why something's happened in that to you. So then you start assuming, you almost start doing the same thing they're doing. You know, you're putting yourself into a box. And I just wondered whether you sort of ever had any experiences of, I wonder why I didn't get that job. Perhaps I came across too flamboyant. And so, have you had that feeling, that experience, or?
Yeah, I've had some very direct ones where it's been a lot more that kind of thing where people would say that I'm being too aggressive or too problematic in these things. So I haven't had the sort of subtle, quiet things where people, well, I haven't noticed them, but I've definitely had the people being quite aggressive or telling me that I was aggressive kind of thing. But what I do is, in every interview that I actually attend these days, if I go for a new role, I will bring up something. I'll mention the fact, I'll out myself, I'll make a joke of it, I'll see how people respond to it. So I've been quite lucky, because when I speak to these companies, you can get a good feeling of how are people going to act, how are the hiring people going to act in these terms when I'm my authentic self. So I've been quite lucky being able to deal with at least the people that I'm specifically working with anyway.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I do not want to hold from anybody else's questions, but I just want to share something with you that you said earlier on, and it made me smile, and your shirt makes me smile. You make me smile, actually. It's beautiful. But I actually, I transitioned a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, and but before I transitioned, I used to work for NASDAQ. I was head of their global tech for PR, and conservative company. And so my shoes that I would wear. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Those would be my shoes, and that would be my shirt. You know, so I didn't actually come out at NASDAQ, but there were some people that who knew, you know, it's like it was pretty, what I was trying to boil the frog, right? I was trying to transition ridiculously, like in a way that, you know, a little bit more color there, a little bit of makeup here and there, and maybe a stud in the ear, you know, and it was, you know, pretty ridiculous to try to do that. In a sense, though, I should have been able to do that, and but in the end, I was lucky. I transitioned at Ladbrokes Coral, and I didn't have so many issues. But I was able to now be authentic. And since I've transitioned in the workplace, what I have found is my relationships. I build the relationships. I mean, at interviews now, I'm like, you know, I go for agile transformation coaches or leadership coaches. I know a few things about transformation, and so you know, and so I'm able to be authentic. And I think it becomes about trust, doesn't it? I mean, you're a psychologist. For me, people behave the way they do because they're insecure. It's making them insecure. So I don't think many people will feel insecure around me, my style and approach, and I can't really see they would around you, Callum, from what you've done, right? So it's really good. But I just wanted to share that. I don't want to hog the floor, so I've got more stuff to say. But
thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was really interesting. And you know what? People just need to be open-minded and not judge. So it was really, I thought that was really great that you came and spoke to us about that. And I love the trainers, by the way.
You know, the funny thing is about the trainers, and I used to wear sort of blouses and things. I mean, I don't know what I was doing. My gender dysphoria was overtaking me. It was like the female side of me was like saying, right, we're thrusting forward. And of course, my insecurities are, you know, and I'd wear perfume, and, you know, in Ladbrokes Coral or macho testosterone driven, somebody would come in and say, what's that horrible smell? Or what's that perfume? Who's wearing perfume? You know, or I'd be worried about leaving a little bit of nail varnish. I've discovered that you could get all of the nail varnish off of every single finger completely, but if you leave one speck of it on one finger, you're rumbled. There's no reason for it. But what I was going to say is, I used to wear these. It was always female jeans, Next slim fit jeans and things, and I'd wear those trainers. Those trainers were the only male piece of attire that I was wearing, which I think is kind of ironic, you know, in terms of people judging the things. So.
That's brilliant. I absolutely love that. Thank you. Ali, hi Ali, you're right.
Hi, nice to see you again. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah,
lovely to meet everyone. Very kind of you for speaking. So I'm just going to put a few points that my mum was talking about. So this is the one on the top that you probably see to the right. So it says, this is what I wrote. So yeah, the society we live in over judges. I feel that we live in a judgmental society, but I guess you have to strive to be yourself. That's just about myself speaking. I was born and raised in the UK, lived here my whole life. And the second point was what my mum always says. So in college and university, I mean, it's not a good thing. I repeat this, it's not a good thing to put people in boxes. So yeah, when my mum speaks about society, she always has said it does not matter what, quote, other people think, kind regards. It's also important to not, I repeat that, it's important to not put people into boxes. That's it, really. But it's not always easy to be yourself in a society that does judge. You just got to strive, you know?
I love your mum. What a lovely philosophy.
Oh, yeah, no worries, thanks.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, I think I was hearing a comedian on TV or YouTube, and it was like, you know, LGBTQ plus or LGBTQ, there could be so many more letters after that. Yeah. There are as many letters as there are people, right? And, you know, a lot of it's a myth, you know, and I'm actually doing an LGBTQ history. I'm on a panel tomorrow, actually, so I might nick some of your info and ideas and stuff. But you know, for me, it is about we're all individuals, and like you said something similar, Callum, that resonated with me as well. That you don't represent the community, you represent Callum. You know, it's people sort of, you know, it's like a little bit saying, well, going up to one person and saying, "What's London like?" And you're going to get such a, you know, narrow perspective. But I think the real secret is what you were saying earlier on, which resonated, is to get out of the bubbles. I mean, people surround themselves by like-mindedness, don't they? So, So they surround themselves by that. They don't learn. They don't see that. This is the issue with social media bubbles: is you never get an expanded horizon or viewpoint. And what we bring along, I think, is that colour, basically, quite literally in our case. And so it's I think important about the individuality from one perspective, and then to actually bring that colour into the equation is amazing.
Very much so, especially when putting people into boxes, but then, as you said, one person doesn't represent everyone.
Yeah.
I've had those conversations with well-meaning allies who have asked questions about the whole community based on my opinion. And I had to say, I'm not the gay pope. I can't make these blanket statements of we all think this. We all enjoy blueberry muffins. We can't do that. So yeah, people like to, if not put you in as a person in a box, but then put you in a bigger box and then a bigger box.
We're all taught, aren't we, Callum, when we're young? I'm sure we've all heard the phrase of, treat others how you yourself would like to be, treated, the golden rule. And I like the platinum rule, which is treat others how they themselves would like to be treated. But the fact that we're always saying, oh, well, I like coffee, so I've got you a drink, I've got your coffee, and you hate coffee. It's got to be the other perspective, hasn't it? From looking at the individual's perspective and asking them how they want to be treated in a diversity program.
It's very much, and I can see that you wrote about this, Nicola, about unconscious bias training and how that's useful. And around this topic, we have a lot of biases. And one of those biases are, amusingly, fallacies, such as if A likes B and B likes C, then A likes C, and things like that. We have a lot of these biases when it comes to thinking about how people react, what people will like, and so on, that we need to start realizing that's an unconscious bias. And they don't always come from problematic places. Our brains like little rules. They like heuristics, ways of thinking. They like these things called schema, which are little quick patterns that your brain puts into place to make it easier to think about things. Like computer programs, you have ones that run just to make things happen a bit easier. And because our brains think and work that way, we like patterns, and we like trying to force patterns on things. So as a result, we end up with all these unconscious biases. We just start thinking in certain ways. An amusing thought on that is gendering things. Lots of people gender things that don't have genders. Just because it's easy to think that way. That's how the brain likes to start compartmentalizing things. So you start gendering robots, for example. You think it's weird, like Daleks. You think they're he, and you're like, well, no, it's a robot, it's an it. But yeah, so because of that, these ways of thinking, we do need to start saying unconscious bias means don't treat people like a group, don't stereotype, don't have that kind of thought. Realize that people are individuals and act like that, and don't try to look for commonalities. We start to try and think empathy is good. We want commonalities between us and a person. We don't want commonalities between person and person so much. Empathy is sort of more you to person rather than saying groups, this is how they act.
Absolutely is. And I mean, I found in my experience, by showing my vulnerability, you were talking about retrospectives.
Yes.
I'm the retrospective queen, in the sense that I can go in and, I'm managing Indian teams, and it's a wall of silence and icons, and getting them to put their cameras on and talking about, really getting to talk to them. But one of the things I've noticed is that by exposing my own vulnerability, I end up, getting more contributions from somebody, and trust ensues from that. And I, you've done that as well, as I'm sure others have here. And certainly for me, it was almost like a switch. It was like I'm being very authentic. Trust me. Do not walk into the office. I mean, at Ladbrokes Coral, one day I was Ralphie, and the next day, a few days later, I came in as Rochelle or Rachel, and it was very, very stressful in the sense I felt very vulnerable, and from that point, I've noticed that it's easier for me to get those relationships that you were referring to earlier.
What made you decide to just do that, make that change on that one day?
it was a bit of planning actually, and I will say for Ladbrokes Coral and the company I was consultant for, ADL, that were there, they were great. They had Stonewall. They actually, it's a really good point that you've made there, because I never really thought about this. What actually drove me to do it, at least around that time? Clearly, it wasn't a one day, but it was in a relatively short period of time. Well, one of the things is that the gender identity clinics in the UK, which are grossly underfunded, I think it's almost a 3-year waiting list to get the first referral, then a year to get the second referral, and then another 6 months before you can, move on from that. To get hormones, for example, it took me over, years to get them. But so it was kind of in the planning, but then they said they would withdraw support if I didn't change my identity on my passport and show I was serious. And, at the time I begrudged that and thought it was terrible, because they said, well, you can't undo the hormones. And I'm like saying, well, you can't undo walking in like a woman. So, in terms of doing that. But it was that Stonewall had these adverts around saying, we want you to bring all of you to work, those adverts they've got on there. And that made me feel comfortable. And then I kind of broached the subject, because I was absolutely scared witless. I did not know how I was going to do this. And I told the person I was contracting through that owned that company once, and I never forget, they were like, they stood up and said, this is, I'm in there like, oh, this is going to be a problem, how are we going to handle it? And he stood up and said, this is a celebration, And so I then treated it like a celebration. And I actually crafted a note to sort of, it was it just changed the mindset of everything. And then people were almost congratulating you and not ostracizing you. So, the conditions, I suppose, were right. I was kind of forced, into that. And I talk about being emotional. I'm on hormones, and then I think every testosterone macho-driven man should take hormones for a month, then see what it's like when things. I was actually, this is what I wanted, really, to be able to express my emotions, and really be who I am. And so I was crying about something, to some sort of big macho manager there. So I don't know how to handle this. So, there were some things around that, but it was a really smooth experience compared to what it could have been. And I always felt it was like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff and it's 1,000 feet down. But when I actually jumped, it was probably maybe only 30 or 40 or maybe 20. It really wasn't, there was it was more the personal chaos on the professional one. So I feel I've had a great experience professionally. I don't think because I'm in this professional environment, but possibly if I worked in a factory somewhere, that work experience would be completely different. I think there's an aspect to that. I don't know if you agree with that, Callum, but that's kind of been my experience so far. I mean, I've had people be really rude to me at train stations on occasions, but only really one major issue. And unfortunately, I was with my wife then, who got really freaked out by the whole thing. But generally, I'm using it to my advantage. I've come alive. I was 5 years old when homosexuality was decriminalized effectively, because it wasn't legalized as such, was it, initially? And so I'm only 2 years old in my head, I think, but it's it's a new life for me. It's just a wonderful experience. It's kind of one life to existences. I'm seeing how I'm treated differently, how maybe I'm not so authoritative. There are very small, subtle things. Callum, I don't know if you've seen that as well, just little tiny things. And certainly for me, from a female gender being treated that way, that I have seen those subtle differences. So that was why the time was really GIC kind of driven it. And suddenly I'm forced to either get off the train and just do it on my own, which was not going to be possible. I was forced to, make things happen. So that's why that was then.
Yeah, I would speak to a lot of this. For me, it was coming out because whenever you are LGBTQIA2S plus, it's every time you meet somebody, you have to make a decision on whether or not you're going to come out to them, which is quite energy consuming. And that plus feeling like I was being inauthentic and spending a lot of energy hiding who I was, because I have worked places where I knew that the boss was homophobic and I've hidden that. I mean, probably wasn't very good at it because I'm quite theatrical anyway, but it definitely felt like it was taking up a lot of my energy to do that. So it was when I changed jobs that I actually then said, right, I'm just going to be authentic. And since then, everywhere I have gone, by being visible, by being authentic, I've always had people message at that place of work and say thank you for just being authentic, you know, for putting things out there. I've had one person that came to me and said, how is it that you're able to get people to recognize that you're gay? Because like people keep asking me about my wife, and I've, you know, been gay for years, kind of thing. Like, not, they've been out, but they were like, how what? So yeah, never underestimate the power of being like visible and so on. So obviously your experience there of you know, being visible and emotional at work, it will help so many people. You might not even realize it. There will be people out there who are just like, yeah, good.
And do you know, that's so true, and not even necessarily with, you know, either orientation or identity issues, but I found that I enjoy helping people grow. I mean, I'm doing a master's degree in leadership coaching. I just really love helping people and, you know, solving their problems, or, you know, I'm an agile coach as well, so I turn it all into a coaching session basically. You know, and just to help people that I wouldn't have been able to do that previously. So I completely relate to that too. Thank you.
Wow, I'm like completely blown away with just, you know, your stories and stuff. It's so good to hear. I'd actually love to catch up with you like separately to this, because, you know, it's just really interesting to learn about it. You know, I've not ever had to experience any, you know, that myself. So I think education is key, and understanding how other people feel. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. Thank you, Callum, and thank you everyone for coming. We're wrapping up now, but just before we do, does anyone have any recommendations of reading or movies or anything that you've seen that you think, you know, you'd recommend for people to watch?
Can I say something? So I'm 36 years old, but in the 70s, my mum grew up in Glasgow. And I can't remember, John Hurt was in a film in the 1970s, something to do with Quentin Crisp. It must have been like 1971 or 1972. But it was called The Naked Civil Servant that my mum watched. But it was years ago. The Naked Civil Servant I think it was John Hurt to my knowledge, but John Hurt has passed away. It was called The Naked Civil Servant my mum watched. And that was my mum's earliest memory of LGBT cinema. It must have been 1971 or so. It was the 70s. It's called The Naked Civil Servant.
I've popped that down.
It's a Quentin Crisp. I don't know if he's still alive, but there was a performance by John Hurt, but John Hurt has died, has passed away.
Yes. Yeah, 1975 release, yeah.
75, yeah, my mum would have been 16 then. She's 61 now, but.
Brilliant.
Well, I'm nearly 60, so, but I refuse to accept that. So in my head, I'm 30.
Oh, never have guessed.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, look, we're coming up to 6, so we'll wrap it up. But if anyone wants to reach out and ask any more questions, either get in touch or directly get in touch with me, I can put you in touch with anyone. But this will be some of this will be recorded. So if you want to refer back to some of the information that Callum talked about, feel free to. And yeah, add me on LinkedIn. I'm always looking at doing more events like this. Barry, I'd love to do more events like this. So if anyone else would like to speak, then do please reach out to me and let me know. But thank you so much, Callum, for doing this. I thought that was brilliant. And thank you. Is it Rochelle or Rachel? What do you prefer?
Rochelle, it's supposed to be.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. And Ali, thank you for your input.
No problem.
Brilliant. All right, take care. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye, guys.